It's time for Fort Worth Musical Moments. Join us now as Steve Markward takes a look at the music and the artists who made the city's vibrant musical legacy what it is today. Hey, here we are. It's Brent Adams and Steve Markward. Fort Worth Musical Moments here for another Friday. How you doing? We're glad to have you, Steve.
Glad to be here. Better late than never, I guess.
We are here. We apologize for the tardiness here. Our special guest today is Larry O'Neill, the proprietor of Fort Worth Memories. He's having some connectivity issues, but we've got him live via phone hookup here. How you doing, Larry?
Hey, I'm good. And in fact, I've kind of worked a way that I think this thing can work. I've got y'all on my iPad, but I just can't figure out how to share this thing because I wanted my members to join in. I'll keep working on this end on that. But listen, guys, I'll take up a few minutes here. Y'all have done a wonderful job with this new group, Fort Worth Musical Moments. It was actually launched from this museum studio a little over a year ago. And y'all don't know how much I appreciate y'all really putting the time and effort into it. And for the listeners of Memories or any of my groups, I might have to share this to y'all later after I get off. But you need to join and not just visit Fort Worth Musical Moments. These guys really put a lot of time and effort and bring these entertainers and all of the history. And today was kind of special for me also. I wanted to pay a tribute to a very, very dear friend of mine. About 2 or 3 years ago, a lady in July walked into my office, my studio here, and sat down and was just as open and friendly. And it was Laura Lynch. She was one of the founding Dixie Chicks. And we became very, very close immediately. So Laura was taken from us, car accident a few weeks ago, and the earth has lost a really special person. But I've got she made me a blow up of the poster board that they used when they played their first set at Caravan of Dreams here in Fort Worth. But also in my studio, I have the piano that Fred T. Papa Calhoun, who played with Milton Brown and the Brownies, the musical Brownies, and it's actually here in my museum. So anytime, Brent, next time you come to town, you need to definitely come by. But you guys have really done a lot of stuff. Buddy Whittington, I called him, and he's probably trying to find me on the other group, or maybe he's on the big group. Buddy, if you're listening in, I told you that Steve and Brent wanted to definitely have you on their show, Fort Worth Musical Moments. But I also brought up the idea that Steve is really taken by the horns and put a sound system into National Hall. And Buddy said, oh, yeah, I'm very familiar with National Hall. And I said, so they would also like to have you out there. They're going to do concerts once a month or once every 2 months. And he was really gung-ho on that. And also Art Greenhow, I talked to him. He has the Light Crust Doughboys now. And I'd like to get him on y'all's show. I'm kind of helping promote Art Greenhaw and the Light Crust Doughboys. So, but yeah, you guys have really done a great job with this show. So, what else do we need to talk about?
We thank you for the compliment on that. I was kind of going through your treasure trove of different things you got going on here that you collected. One of the things that popped up here, you talk about the Light Crust Doughboys here. If I can find that, you had a sign-in from an event they had there. And of course, now I can't find. Oh, here it is. Here we go. Happy days are here again. Welcome to the dedication of a New Burris Mill, February 15th, 1936. That's a pretty cool piece.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've got all of the photos of it and the group that played. Over the years, Brent, I've been blessed that Jerry Lee Lewis, I used to detail their cars when I was over there on 7th Street. But setting Elvis's plane twice and talked to him for about an hour each time. I've been blessed that a lot of these entertainers and I have crossed paths. And so, the music in Fort Worth and how it started and the hard work that everybody's put in, it just seems like that really we don't get enough recognition here. It's all Nashville, Nashville, Nashville. But with guys like y'all that are helping to bring that here, I think that it'll become better. In fact, I talked to our mayor, Maddie Parker, and they're trying to figure out a way to get more entertainment here to the city. So hopefully with all of us working together, hopefully something will come across. But y'all's show is really a fantastic show.
We'd love to get Maddie behind what we're doing over at National Hall. And, Larry, and thank you for those kind words, by the way. And thanks for reaching out to me over a year ago and you and I sitting down, and because I'd been on your show a couple of times. So you were always very generous in allowing me to promote my music and my cause as I was building it back in those early days from 2020 on. And then when you put the word out that you wanted to start a music show, and you and I got together, I'm very proud of what we've been able to do, and we've just scratched the surface, and Lord knows I'm most grateful that I got Brent to jump on board, because otherwise this thing would be a fire drill, I'm sure.
Even more than it already is.
You running it.
But Larry, let me ask you something real quick. I've got to ask you this. This is my crazy thinking. So you're the detailer to the stars, so to speak. You're talking about detailing Jerry Lee Lewis's car, Elvis's stuff. Lord only knows who.
George W.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: when you're detailing cars, you go through every nook and cranny, right?
Yes, sir.
So what is the craziest, weirdest, wildest thing you've ever found in somebody's car? You don't have to name names.
Well, no, I'm going to save that for later. Some of these people that help promote me want me to do a tell-all, because I have done pretty much all the cars and I don't want my detail base to get excited. I would never put a name out, but I've basically seen it all in 47 years, Steve.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get out there and have people thinking that I'm going through their cars, but you'd be amazed at what people leave in cars.
Yeah. It's kind of like here's your car, the rebate's in the trunk, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you a crazy story. Jerry Lee called me a number of years ago, and he said, hey, boss, he said, one of my buddies, another guy from Louisiana over here, is going to come over and perform at Will Rogers. And he said, if he brings you his car Saturday morning early, can you have it ready by 1 or 2? He's going to play in the Coliseum that evening. I said, sure. I said, who is it? And he said, you'll know when you see him. Here comes a 59 Ford convertible. This little bitty guy gets out. I'm thinking, who in the heck is this guy? And so I go through the whole drill and tell him, yes, sir, it'll be ready. And he's staying at one of the hotels downtown, the Texas Hotel, in fact. He said, I'll just walk back up there. And I said, I'll be happy to take you. So I took him. And I said, I need for the record, what's your name? And he said, Johnny. And then I said, Johnny Rivers. And he said, yeah. He gave me 50 seats up in the nosebleed section. And he comes out on the stage with a stool and a guitar. And that was it. That was the group. And sang all of them, Poor Side of Town, everything. And he went on there and go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of my favorite all-time songs is Poor Side of Town. I love that song.
Yeah. So anyway, he was talking to the audience, and he said, somebody hollered out, hey, we saw you on the television, the USO show. He said, yeah, Bob Hope. I was at a party in California. And he said, Bob Hope got a few of us liquored up. And he said, next thing I know, I was on a helicopter and we're heading for a ship to go to Vietnam to do a USO show. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, but it wasn't too bad. Ann Margaret was right next to me.
Yeah, that'll.
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of, and when I sat on Elvis's plane, the guy that got me there, he came by. I was detailing out of Frank Kent's old building then, and it was Bob Hall, the Jordanaires. He's no longer with us. His son's alive here. We need to get him on your show. But the Jordanaires were Elvis's gospel group,
Right.
the backup band. So he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "It was on a Saturday." And I said, "I'm just getting the work lined out for Monday." He said, "Ride with me out to Meacham Field. I want you to meet somebody." And Elvis had just bought the Lisa Marie, and he had it tricked out there at Meacham Field. And so they rolled the stairs up, and then Elvis started down, and then we went in the plane, and I sat there and talked to him for about 30 minutes. Then the second time, John came by and said, "Hey, Elvis is going to be out there, and I got an appointment to be to. Can you go out there and represent me?" And I talked to him for about 45 minutes, and it was like the highlight of my life. I went home and I told my mother. She was a huge Elvis fan. And I said, but something was wrong with his eyes. I said, maybe he's got to go to the doctor. Of course, now we all know he was on drugs. But yeah, I've met a lot of these performers, and you know, it's just been every day of my life, I'm perfect. I could never do anything, you know, a guy that's not educated to get down the road and meet a lot of people. So, and y'all are too, Brent, you do an amazing job.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. As I'm sitting here listening to this, I wonder, what do you talk about with Elvis when you're on his plane?
Well, we just, he asked me a couple of questions. He said, so John tells me that you detail cars and that you've got you collect stuff about Fort Worth. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, I've played here a lot. And he said, if you've got something, I'll be happy to sign it. And I said, I just happen to have something in my truck I brought with me. And he signed one of the playbills for when he was playing out at Will Rogers, it was Will Rogers. And no, it wasn't. I had an old playbill from when he played in 1956, Northside Coliseum, and he signed it.
Wow. You still have it?
Yes, it's locked up in a climatic controlled building along with some other special stuff. But yeah, I've got it. And later, I sent him correspondence. He sent me a application that he had filled out. He sent me a bunch of stuff that was his. And I had a customer. His name was J.P. Ashley. He's passed on, but he was in charge of the express mail here in Fort Worth. And he said, I know you're an Elvis nut, so I'm going to bring you this. Back in the day, in the 60s, he was SAE fraternity at Texas Tech, and he was in charge of entertainment. He wrote a check, and I've got the check, and it's made out for $25. He said, Elvis, Johnny Cash, the Big Bopper, and Richie Valens toured all of these college towns. And he said they play 4 songs for $25. And I said, wow, that's not very much. He said, for back then it was. He said they all lived in their car. They stank. But he said he made the check for $25 and made it to Johnny Cash. And Cash came up and said, hey, I can't cash that. The law's looking for me. Make it to Elvis. And he just put one thin line through it and put E. Presley, and Elvis signed it. And I've got that check.
Wow.
You know, Larry, and I'm telling you, that was such a great time when those guys were coming up the ranks and getting started, and they're out there playing these shows off the back of a flatbed trailer. I remember my dad told me a story about when he was working in the oil field in the 50s out in Brownfield, Texas, and Snyder, Andrews. I was born in Odessa, so I'm oil field trash, I guess you could call it. But anyway, he said that those guys would come through there. He said one time he went to go see Webb Pierce play at the fairground there or park or whatever there in Brownfield. There's not much to Brownfield. There's certainly not much today. It's really a dying town. But he said that Webb Pierce, they went to see Webb Pierce, and the opening act was this guy that came out in this blue suit or pink suit and blue suede shoes, and it was Elvis. And he said he was jumping around. We thought this guy's crazy. They had no idea who he was. Yeah. But those guys, coming through the ranks, I mean, how exciting, of course, people were just hearing this stuff, kind of like when we hear a new brand of music, it's for me, it takes a while for me to accept when it's really radically different, and you don't appreciate it until it, gets a little more seasoned or a little older. But another thing about these guys that reach this iconic status, and there are very few of them. You can name them almost on one hand, but Elvis is certainly one of them. John Castleberry, who's a good friend of mine and Kurt's, and one of the charter investors in Clarksville Creative Sound, toured with both Paul McCartney and Bob Dylan. And of course, I'm a huge Dylan fan. And I asked him, I said, what was it like touring with Dylan? I said, what was it like? I mean, because Dylan is so elusive, in interviews and things, he's not the most personable guy. And I said, what did you ever sit and converse with him? He goes, well, let me tell you, he goes, when I auditioned to be on his tour band as a guitarist, I went in there and Dylan was there, and he sat in the corner and he watched me play, and and then the audition ended, and he came over to me and sat down, and he never told me I got the gig. He just asked me a ton of questions, and I just felt like he's the, and so I just sat there and tried to, be calm. And, I'm sitting here with Bob Dylan, this is in the early 80s or late 70s, I guess. And he said, Dylan asked him tons of questions, and it had nothing to do with music. He wanted to know about his family. He's asking him questions about his kids, his wife, where he grew up, and then John said 6 months later, he gets a call saying, you're on the tour, be in such and such town at such and such time. So he joins the tour about 6 or 7 months later. Dylan walks up to him off stage. He goes, oh, hey, John, welcome. Glad you're here. He goes, how's it? He named every one of his kids, his wife, and what John said, the whole deal there is John, he wanted to know all about you. The last thing you want to do in front of guys like that is gush over them.
Wow. Wow, that's a great story.
He said, what makes Dylan, a guy like Dylan, real uncomfortable is when people, oh, I'm a huge fan, and just gushing. He just wants to be treated like a normal guy,
Right.
So I'm sure those guys. Go ahead.
Some of those musicians I've run across, that's all they are. They're just regular folks, just like you and everybody else. Buddy Whittington. I sure hope Buddy is. I finally shared it now to 4 or 5 of my platforms. So, Buddy, if you didn't catch the first of it, we had technical issues. I'm not that technical savvy, you'd think, with all these shows I've done. But Brent and Steve Marquardt and Michael Marquardt were together. They're going to put together these concerts or events out at National Hall, and what a beautiful hall that is. It's immaculate every time I've ever been there. And they would like to have you, number one, on Fort Worth Musical Moments, and number two, start being involved in that concert venue out there. A lot of musicians, and you can actually help out with that. And plus, it'll give you a lot of exposure. Not that you need it, but so I think we just need to get more musicians in Fort Worth involved, and I'm going to start a deal over here, Steve, and it's going to start in February. We're going to have it hour and a half or 2 hours, once or twice a month on a Saturday morning, and just have it roundtable discussion, and we can talk about whatever, but I want to have some of these musicians come in and get their ideas on different things, because really we can make a big difference if we just get the word out. Exposure is the name of the game.
Well, Fort Worth is such a colorful place, Larry, and we say this all the time, but only because it's true, that when you compare Fort Worth to a town like Dallas or a city like Dallas, we've got, Dallas is a big city, steel and glass, and all the flash and panache. But Fort Worth, even though it's become a big city, we're right at 1 million people now. Fort Worth proper, I guess. Now you know better than I do, but we've not lost the soul, and we've preserved the soul of this community and of the city, and therefore it still has a kind of a smaller town feel. And for if you're a business person, there's no better town to network in than Fort Worth. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But let's talk about Buddy Whittington for a second, because man, what a monster guitar player he is and musician. And he's another guy that's been around a lot of great. I mean, he played with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, who had another
for years.
They had another aspiring guitarist by the name of Eric Clapton in their group for a while. And and Buddy's right up there with Eric, maybe better, you know, uh, probably is better. But I'm just tickled to death that he's here in Fort Worth and accessible, and there's an opportunity for us to get him involved in what we're doing, because we want to do a lot of different types of music and feature a lot of different genres of music out at National Hall, not just the country and western swing, which we all love, but we're talking about doing a big band night, you know, like the Tommy Dorsey type stuff. And so something featuring Buddy. And of course, Buddy, I know, loves western swing. I saw that in his bio. He appreciates the Bob Wills stuff and all that. So what a gas it would be to get him on stage to play some western swing stuff with us as well. But we can get into all kinds of things if we can get Buddy involved.
If you can, when you Google Buddy, he played this song live in my studio, 199, or maybe it's called Highway 199. It's a great story. You know, a lot of people know my background. Kind of grew up in a gangster atmosphere, life. And my dad had me on the highway at 10 years old. I was trying to figure out ways to make money as a kid. But Buddy has written a song, and it's called 199, and it's a great song. But, you know, when you was talking about the big band era, you know, Robert Broyles and Curtis Butts and Sam Gann and all those guys. Robert Broyles' dad was Curly Broyles, and he took over the Tommy Dorsey band when Dorsey passed on. So, and a lot of them played right out there at Casino Beach.
Yeah.
That was the big band era. Frank Sinatra was a regular here. Sammy Davis, all of them. They were here during the 40s and the 50s.
And Harry James got his start right here in Fort Worth, I know. And
yeah,
a lot of those guys would play also out at Mineral Wells at that Baker Hotel, which was a playground for the rich and famous at one time.
And they're fixing to reopen that too.
One of these days, yeah, we were driving. Jill and I went through Mineral Wells yesterday because had to go out to our lake house to check on some things, and we were wondering, you know, because the last time we saw, I mean, signs at one time said opening in spring of 22. Well, then 23 went by. It's just taken them. I mean, it's a huge project, but that hotel looks better and better every time I go by. And for Brent, for your information, it's a beautiful old hotel that was built. It's the sister hotel. If you've ever been to Hot Springs, Arkansas, the sister hotel to that identical is the Arlington Hotel there in Hot Springs. And it was built, and Mineral Wells is another place that has the natural springs
right.
for therapeutic, has great therapeutic value. And so you had all these movie stars like Judy Garland and of course Mary Martin, who's from Weatherford, spent a lot of time out there performing, and all kinds of movie stars would fly in to that. They had an army base out there, and they'd fly in and spend time at the old Baker Hotel, and they would broadcast from the ballroom at the top of that hotel, and they're redoing that ballroom, restoring it to its former splendor, and they're going to hopefully have. I mean, it'd be cool to do, because Bob Wills and his guys played there, so wouldn't it be cool to do a Western swing deal and revive that at that old Baker Hotel?
It absolutely would. It sounds a lot like what we have in the Southern Indiana area with the French Lick Springs and West Baden hotels, which were big there in the early 1900s and drew the likes of Al Capone and so forth. And of course, French Lick later being known as the home of Larry Bird.
When you talk about Al Capone, you're talking about Larry's kind of guys. No, I'm just kidding.
All those guys, yeah. they were very mobile for their time, because it seems like they were everywhere.
Well,
they had to be. They had to stay on the move.
From what I understand, Larry and Brent, I think Bonnie and Clyde kept a suite there at the Baker Hotel, but it was like on the 13th floor or something like that. I don't know.
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, Bonnie and Clyde roamed the area here. We had our gangster, and that was also on Jacksboro Highway. That was the same thing as going out to Casino Beach. So that would, years ago, Steve, I don't know if you were aware, there was a real estate guy. It's a friend of mine. He tried to revive the old casino. They just couldn't get enough enthusiasm from the business end. But I've got the actual lease that the city signed with Casino Beach back in 1917 when it opened. Don't ask me how I got it, but I got it. And they really they had a heck of a boardwalk out there. We had the Thriller was the roller coaster. It was the second largest roller coaster in the United States, second only to Coney Island. But they really, they danced to the stars out there. They brought in, and this was during World War II and all of those. So I've got tons of souvenir photo books where you sit there with your girlfriend and they took your picture and they put it in a Casino Beach folder. So yeah, it was really back in the day, man. And I'm going to tell you, you got to give credit to Amon Carter Sr. He had just taken over and merged the two papers, called it the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And one of his guys came to him and he said, "Hey, Amon, a coming thing is this crystal radio." And Amon said, "Yeah, I've heard about it and I'm not interested." He said, "Man, it'll put us on top if we can just get this thing done." And so he said, "I'm going to give you $150 and that's all I'm going to put into this thing." And so he finally got it perfected. And he said, "The last thing I got to do is go to Washington, D.C. and get it registered." And that's where they put the call letters, WBAP, we bring a program. Everybody says Amon thought that up. It wasn't. That was the call letters that were given to that station here in Fort Worth. And so they really ramped it up. WBAP is one of the largest radio deals there is. So back when they built the Blackstone Hotel, they decided to dance on top on the rooftop, and WBAP was the one playing all the Tommy James and all of that stuff.
Wow. And WBAP was the first, according to my brother's documentary film and his research, WBAP predates all the other shows as far as a barn dance, country hoedown type of live show, predating Grand Ole Opry or Louisiana Hayride or any of those deals. It was all
yes, it was the first of all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michael's done a wonderful job on that, his documentary. People, if you haven't had a chance to experience the birthplace of Western Swing, Steve's brother, Michael Marquardt, he has spent lots of money and no telling how many hours.
Well, I think he's on the verge of working out a deal with, I hope I'm not getting in trouble by saying this, but they're real close to agreeing on a deal where PBS is going to release this thing on a nationwide basis, which would be great.
Well, that's fantastic. I know he had some issues with copywriting, and at first, when he first got into it, that never even came into the conversation. Then when he got everything done, he said, "Oh my gosh, this is a nightmare."
The licensing is the most expensive part of this deal. Production is one thing, but licensing is 3 times what the production cost is and of course, when you got a documentary film that's dealing with spanning, almost 100 years of history, there's a lot of properties and things, some of that stuff is public domain, but most of it you got to pay, and you got to pay dearly for. So he's having to navigate through that and work with some people to try to get him, a special status like fair use. I can't remember what it's called now, to try to save some money. But I'm telling you, that film is gonna it's a landmark deal, and it's leading the charge to bringing back this genre of music. And we're in our own small way, we're trying to do it with the music that I'm writing, and Kurt Ryle and I are writing and producing, and so we're excited about that. But another thing too that's interesting, you mentioned Papa Calhoun and Milton Brown and the Brownies. So here's something, we've talked about this on the show before, but I'll bring it up for those listeners that haven't heard this real quick. Another first, Fort Worth first, and it also involves mineral wells out west of here. But so Bob Dunn, who played with Milton Brown in those early days, got a hold of some recordings of a guy named Joseph Kekeku, who was a Hawaiian-style guitar player he'd lay a guitar in his lap and play with a bar, like a slide guitar, and he had those sounds that a Hawaiian guitar makes, that kind of thing. And Bob Dunn was enamored with that and trying to figure out how he can incorporate that into Milton's music, and they experimented with that, and he was out visiting a friend of his in Mineral Wells who was stationed at that Army base out there at the time. And this guy happened to be a radio operator and was an electronics guy. And so they were fooling around one day, and the radio operator guy said, if we could make your guitar louder, that would be cool. And he fashioned a coil that he installed in this acoustic guitar, wired it up, plugged it in, and voila, I kid you not, the electric guitar was invented right there.
Yes, yes.
And they said that the first time that Bob Dunn unveiled that at Crystal Springs Ballroom in Fort Worth, that place was packed. The dancers just stopped in their tracks. They're like, what in the world is that sound? And if you listen to a lot of those old Milton Brown tunes, you'll hear that thing. It's got kind of an otherworldly sound, but it's so cool. And so, I mean, I'm talking, everybody from Jimi Hendrix to Buddy Whittington to Eric Clapton, they all have Bob Dunn to thank for inventing the electric guitar.
Wow. Wow. You know, I had a friend of mine that does these high-end private auctions, and I reached out to a couple of guys that, Lance Bird and Wes Williams, they had a private sale for a guitar that Eric Clapton, a left-handed Stratocaster for Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
And so he got ready to give it to him, and he was going to give it to him at a show Hendrix was doing. And Jimmy had passed on, and so this thing went on the market, and Wes was telling me, he said it'll go for $500,000 or $600,000. I heard from my buddy $650,000.
Wow. Yeah, I just saw somewhere where a guitar just sold for like $4.5 million. I can't remember whose guitar it was, but anyway, it's crazy what people will pay for that stuff.
This slide I'm throwing up here is actually Jimi Hendrix 1970 in Fort Worth.
Wow.
I was there.
Look at that.
I watched that show. I was working at the cellar downtown as a bouncer, and Pat Kirkwood, he really didn't allow African Americans in there. And so I left the concert and went to work, and here comes Hendrix and his crew. And I said, hey, Pat, we need to let this guy in, you know. And he said, who is it? And I said, Jimi Hendrix. I just watched him. And he said, well, go ahead. And boy, Hendrix, his whole crew was with him. They stayed about 2 or 3 hours, had a great time. Jimmy was messed up, you know, but he's probably one of the only African Americans that ever went into the cellar downtown.
What do you remember about that show and about the way he played?
I'm going to tell you, everybody in that audience had to have been messed up because everybody was smart. The marijuana was just rampant. And he had a double-headed guitar, and he kept trying to smash it and break it, and he never could get it done. It was a white guitar. I remember it like it was yesterday, and we were down on the floor, 4th row. I don't have any idea how I could have gotten the tickets because I know they had to be astronomical, but yeah, it was a great show, and everybody was just in awe with the music, but the marijuana was just through the roof. So it was a great show, though.
Yeah, talk about some history. I don't want to lose something that you said earlier when you were talking about Elvis. You know, we're talking about the 70s there and him asking you about your collection, but where did all that start? You know, your love for collecting all things Fort Worth. I mean, is that a matter of civic pride or a deep nostalgia, or just where does that come from?
It actually, you know, people that know my background, my dad, on my dad's side of the family, was kind of, we were on the wrong side of the tracks. But anyway, there was a guy that I met that was an attorney for the Lipschitz family here in Fort Worth. They owned Zales Jewelers and West Texas Produce, and he would sit outside before they would let him in to have a family business meeting. And he gave me a couple of old deeds to properties that were at Sam Rosen. Sam Rosen was one of the early Jewish developers here in Fort Worth. And I just got the bug, and I've got a photographic memory. So once I started reading this stuff, I then didn't want to keep it only in my mind. I wanted to own it. So $4,300,000 later, got 89,000 pieces.
Wow. So, and I'm sure when you first started kind of combing the market for things like that, and of course you didn't have eBay or you didn't have marketplace or any of that stuff these days. So I'm sure it came a little slow, but as people started catching on to the fact that you were doing that, I would imagine stuff pretty much finds you now, huh?
Yes. In fact, I've been in the detail business the same number of years, and I'm fortunate enough that some of the almost all of the founding families, I've been doing their cars for generations. And so when they either decided they wanted to sell it or give it to me, the word just kind of spread. I get people that call me from all over the world now that have Fort Worth stuff, whether they want to sell it or give it to me. And I can pretty much put a price on it. I've been that involved in it. And the city, I had the Alice Walton's bean counters came out last June, and we talked about her purchasing the museum or my collection and donating it to the city. But we're not much farther down the road than that original conversation. But anyway, the city there's no way they can let this collection get away.
Right. So can you see our video?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Tell us about the white car that's in this picture.
The white car in the picture is my dad's car. It was the last car he ever owned. And I came to find out that he didn't pay anything for that car. There was only 145 of those made with a 409 in 1962. They actually killed him in that car. And it took me 18 months to get that car out of the county pound. But, yeah, that car has got a special place in my heart. There was actually 2 shotguns, one in each door. And if you know anything about the cars of the 60s, there was a dimmer switch down on the left floorboard.
All right.
If somebody came up and opened that door and opened it towards the middle of their waist, Daddy hit the dimmer switch and they didn't have a belt buckle anymore.
That sounds like
my dad was a shooter for Benny Binion, Horseshoe Casino people.
That sounds like some James Bond stuff there.
Yeah, he was an early day James Bond guy.
So one of the things that really fascinates me about your collection here is I was just kind of going down a rabbit trail this week, looking at some of the stuff that you post because, there are very few people who post more of this stuff on social media than you do. And it's so fascinating what you got out here. Everything from World War II memorabilia to, wrestling, professional wrestling to, right now the Fort Worth Stock Show is going on here and rodeo, and you have amassed quite a collection of rodeo memorabilia.
Oh yeah, the badges and stuff. I've got a guy came by last week. He said, "How many badges have you got?" And I actually did a count last night, 1,380. And I've got a ribbon that's from the 1900 Feeders and Breeders Show. That's where they called it the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show. And I've got the only ribbon that there is. I've got original stockholder badges from Feeders and Breeders, and that's when the show didn't bring in enough money to pay the prize money. So guys like W.T. Wagner and several other of the early day guys, McFarland and them, they put up the money out of their pocket, and so they made them stockholders in it. And there was a company here called the Stockyards Company, and I've got all of the minutes from them. I've just been fortunate to have the money at the time when these things went on the market.
Well, everybody had their claim to fame, and their special part within the World War II effort. And I saw you shared this earlier this week or last week here, the Globe Beam. And I had to do a little digging because I wasn't really familiar here, but the Globe Aircraft Company had their own kind of internal publication that went to stockholders and employees and probably dealers and enthusiasts and so forth. Some really cool stuff there as you start to look at what all they did here. They had their own boxing team, they had their own basketball team, and really were a big part of the community in many ways.
Same way with Carswell Air Force Base. They had their own boxing and sports teams, and then they had GDRA, General Dynamics Recreation Area. But those early day war manufacturing companies, they were the biggest part of Fort Worth. And back in the 40s during the World Wars, you either worked at General Dynamics or LTV or Bell Helicopter or something. Fort Worth was a huge defense manufacturing town.
Yeah, I grew up, Larry, on the far west side of Fort Worth, went to Waverly Park Elementary, Leonard Middle School, and then Western Hills High School. In our neighborhood, yeah, you were either Air Force kid or GD, General Dynamics kid, or Bell Helicopter. And my dad, we were kind of the odd ducks because my dad was working for Mid-Continent Supply Company with Davis family. And so, but all my friends, just about all of them, had dads that were in the military, Air Force, and I remember one girl down the street. Her dad was MIA in Vietnam, and she wore his bracelet. And I don't think they ever found him. And I remember how I used to think about that and think, man, it just sent chills up my spine, and it made me grateful that my dad was around, because I can only imagine what it would be like to wonder, day in and day out, whatever happened to your father, over there. But that's so just about all my friends were Air Force brats.
I was going through a Richland High School annual the other day, a few months ago. Somebody had brought by, and a lot of times people don't realize that they leave stuff in between the pages. Well, an article popped out from the Star-Telegram about a guy that went to Richland before I did, way before I did. 64, he was one of the first. Richland was opened in 62, and it said this guy's name. It said he was missing in Vietnam 24 months or whatever, and they had declared him dead. And so I just kind of looked at it and and I talked about it on one of my lives that day, and somebody said, Larry, that guy's not dead. He's one of the spokespersons for Southwest Airlines. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And so I researched, he is the spokesperson for Southwest Airlines. And I called, and he returned the call the next day. He said, no, I've seen your show, and I want to come visit your museum. And I said, well, I got an article here said you were pronounced dead. And he said, you got to be kidding me. And I said, no. And I took a picture of it and sent it to him. And he said it took several months for the whatever part of the War Department to take that down. But it's just kind of strange what you find in different things,
Wow. So what would you say is and this is a hard question, I know, because you have so much, but what are some of your favorite or most unique pieces in the collection?
Amon Carter had 85 keys to the city made. They were all photo op keys. And so he'd present them mostly to presidents. He would present them, and then he'd take the key back. I own 67 of those keys. There's thousands, hundreds, or probably thousands of pieces that are one of a kind. You can't redo them or whatever. So I've got some valuable stuff. I spent $4.5 million in 40 something years. My family doesn't like to hear that story, but
imagine.
We still like to get them through TCU and SMU.
Brent, for your information, Amon Carter, you probably heard of him. He's pretty famous, but nothing significant happened in Fort Worth without Amon Carter blessing it. And he was like the Pope of Fort Worth. I mean, everything revolved around him, and he was a power broker, and had friends with FDR and all these presidents and movie stars. I think he's the one that got Jimmy Stewart in town, and Jimmy Stewart got very wealthy, much wealthier in the oil business out of Fort Worth than he ever did in the movies. And Jimmy Stewart was on the board of directors, I think, of the Fort Worth Zoo, Larry, I believe.
Yeah. He really promoted our zoo. But when you talk about Amon, people say, was he in the good old boy system? He invented it,
Yeah.
and his members were presidents. FDR thought Amon's council was the best council he ever had. I mean, FDR and Amon were like brothers. Amon, in fact, paid for Elliott Roosevelt. That's FDR's youngest son. He had been married 7 times, and he met a gal here in Fort Worth, and Amon was talking to the president, and he said, I'm not paying for that kid to have another wedding. He's had too many. Amon said, I'm going to take care of it, boss. But Ruth Goggins was her name, and she was from the rich people. She, in fact, gave Elliott Roosevelt, FDR's son, KFJZ as a wedding present.
That's interesting.
And when they started that Texas State Network, that was when Elliott Roosevelt owned it.
You know, it's a great story, Larry, about, the power brokers, and a lesser known guy by the name of Ken Davis, who started Mid-Continent Supply Company, which grew into the largest independent oil field supply company in the world. At its height, when Mr. Davis passed away in '68, I believe it was, they had over almost 100 companies in that universe there under the Ken Davis umbrella. And so when Ken Davis was Amon Carter was very public. Ken Davis was extremely private, and he's maybe to a paranoid point almost. And he taught his 3 sons, to be very discreet. And of course, one of the sons.
One of them didn't end up that way.
One of them didn't end up that way and dragged that whole name through the mud. And we all know that story about Cullen Davis. But when Ken Davis was alive, the story goes that they were at the Fort Worth Club or Petroleum Club or one of those places, maybe Fort Worth Club at the time. I don't even know if the Petroleum Club was open at that time, but perhaps it was. But and Amon Carter was talking about, they were kind of having a contest to who's got more power, I guess, and more money without, comparing dollars. And finally, Amon Carter said, well, he goes, when it comes to Fort Worth, pretty much nothing happens here without me saying so. And he goes, I got Fort Worth pretty much locked up. And Ken Davis reared back and he goes, okay, Amon, you can have Fort Worth. I'll take the rest of the world. And there's a book that Kevin Mooney, who was the PR director at Mid-Continent in its heyday, back when my dad worked there. My dad went to work there in '54 as in the mailroom and left there as vice president of sales. And but Kevin Mooney was the PR director, and he wrote a book that Bill Davis financed. It's really interesting. If you don't have a copy of it, I'll get a copy of it for you. But it's called "I'll Take the Rest of the World," and it actually it talks a little bit about, it doesn't say anything about Cullen and that whole thing, because that's been written about. But it's more about Ken Davis and how he grew up poor as dirt, and he was a ruthless businessman. But it quotes my father in there a few times too. But it's a fascinating book, because there's not a whole lot written, that's been written about old man Davis, and what an interesting story that was.
I'd love to have that book. I've never even heard of that book.
I'll get a copy of it from you. I just got to reach out to Bill Davis. He can get. He sent last time I needed another copy. He sent it to me within a few days, so we'll get you a copy of that.
Super duper.
So, what haven't you acquired that you'd still love to?
I don't know. People come at me. I've got a couple of people that have reached out to me that want a lot of money for different items that I don't want to talk about, because I'm hoping that they'll end up figuring out I'm the only one that they'll get. But the most thought about thing that I think about, in 1918, 19, and 20, and even 21, there was a couple of brothers, the Varner brothers. They started a car company in Dallas, a car manufacturing plant. They moved on $600. They moved it to Fort Worth, and over at the old Gerhard Owen Sprocket place over off McCart was where their actual factory was. And the car was called the Texan. And there's very few of them left. There was only 1,000 trucks made and 2,000 cars. So as you can imagine, there's probably a handful. There's one of their roadsters in a Ohio museum. And I actually had the guy he said, I'll sell it to you for $35,000. And so I agreed to buy it. And in the interim of about one day, he found out I had a museum, and he said, no, that thing's $65,000. So now he doesn't even want to sell it, but I'd love to have one of those Texan automobiles inside the museum here somewhere.
What a great story. That reminds me of like that Tucker automobile. They made that movie with Jeff Bridges, of course, you try to launch you get too big, the big three automakers would shut you down. They had their lobbyists that made it impossible for you to gain penetration in the market. But
this car, actually, Steve, if you ever go over there on McCart, there's one inside that building. And so when I heard that a few years ago, I went over there and I said, well, can I talk to somebody about it? And he said, yeah. So we sat down and I said, how much? I'd like to buy that car. And he said, well, it's for sale, kind of like your museum. And I said, oh, you know who I am? And he said, yeah. He said, you can buy the car, but you got to buy the building and my company. And so I said, well, that'll end that deal.
Larry, do you have there's a book that came out as well by remember Mac and Madeline Williams? Yeah. In Old Fort Worth. You've got that book. I've got. And it's a reprint of the articles they did. They did a great job of historical articles in that paper. That was the old Fort Worth News Tribune, I believe, is what it's called. Yeah, B.B. Paddock's deal. Yeah, great folks. Mac and Madeline were, but there's a story in there about, and that's the thing. You just never know, the things that are going on or have gone on in Fort Worth. And one of the more interesting stories was that Kay Kimball, and I thought, okay, everybody's heard of the Kimball Art Museum. It's one of the most renowned art museums, one of the greatest collections in one museum in the world. And it was all started, by the personal private collection of Kay Kimball. But they said it was nothing to go, when he started at Kimball Mills and had the food company there right off of, I guess it was South Main, right? And yes. You can still see his building there, I believe. You can still see the Kimball name etched in the limestone at the top. They said you'd walk in and it was nothing to see a stenographer there typing away with a Monet hanging behind him, Right. And he collected all. And that was the nucleus of the collection, which is now the Kimball Art Museum, which is world renowned. I've got a Welcome to Fort Worth magazine that's really not in very good shape, but it was put out in 1928, and it shows a picture of Park Hill Edition, which my mother lived up there. And there was only 4 houses built in 1928 at that time. One of them, Kay Kimball owned. And so I started researching it, and he had a carport, not really a garage. And they later walled it in, and that's where the Kimball Art Museum actually started. He would have one of those high dollar paintings just sitting out there that, it wasn't preserved. So, the Williams I'll tell you another real interesting story. Mac Williams' wife, she had just started for the newspaper. And so her boss said, hey, go out to Forest Park and talk to the people celebrating Juneteenth. And she said, okay, what's that? Why am I going out there? And he said, because on Juneteenth, that's the only day that African Americans are allowed to go to Forest Park. And she said, why? And he said, look, just go out there and do the story. So she went out there and talked to a lot of people celebrating Juneteenth. And so when she got back and wrote her story, she went back to the city desk and asked her boss, said, is that a law or what? And he said, lady, I don't know. Go talk to the police department. Well, she researched it. There was never any law. It was just somebody started that rumor. So that was pretty much her last year at the paper, because she went around telling everybody, hey, y'all can go to Forest Park any day you want. And that's how stuff gets started, and nobody ever questioned it. Man, it was a different world back then. It's hard to believe But I mean, yeah, when we were born, you and I were born, Larry. I'm not going to speak for Brent, but you know, that world was very much the way it was, you know, and you know, so. Well, look, this is Fort Worth musical moment, so let's get on the music track here. Brent, you got something?
Yeah.
I do have some. I want to help Larry out with something here, and I'm glad you brought that up, Steve. He posted a picture here a week or two ago about this band here, and was trying to figure out who it is. Now, we know it's not the Beatles, it's not the Rolling Stones, it's not the Guess Who, but can you guess who? We would love to know who this is.
Is it Blood Rock?
That was, yeah, that was Blood Rock. Stevie Hill and them.
Look at the
The guitar player looks real similar to Buddy Whittington.
Look at the audience. So it looks like they're playing to a nursing home.
Yeah, there with bales of hay out there.
I mean, look at the beehive hairdos.
You know, I was thinking about doing a show here if we could revive or find some of the members of the first garage bands. You know, I talk to Buddy all the time about Gary Carpenter started the Jades out in Haltom City, and he stayed in the music business the rest of his life. Did you ever hear of them, Steve?
I heard of them, and Gary and I are friends. In fact, Gary's been threatening to play with my A-list band from time to time, but we haven't been able to coordinate schedules. He almost got on this gig for February 3rd, but had something else going on. But of course, Gary's a very successful commercial real estate guy, but I didn't realize that he was a part of that 60s garage band invasion movement thing that went on here, which is a whole, you know, that's that whole thing that Mark Nobles did that documentary film on called
Yeah.
Togo.
Yeah. And they played at these roller rinks. You know, that's the only way they could get their music out.
Well, that's how Buddy Holly started too.
Yeah.
Wow. So Blood Rock, that was a band in the 70s. I remember we got a hold of one of their records. There's a song that went around, kind of a cult song called DOA. And
DOA, I knew you was going to say that.
It's the darkest song. I mean, my brother and I would lay in bed and turn the lights out and listen to that song. It's all about a first-person narrative of a guy that gets in a car wreck driving, I think because he was really high, and he wrecked his car, and it's his last thoughts as the life is ebbing out of him. He's bleeding to death, and the very end of the song is, you know, everything fades out, but the heartbeat, boom, 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 and then it just goes, and then flatlines, and it's like, man, I mean, you talk about an eerie song,
right? And it starts off with a siren going.
Yes, and I think you can find that. You might be able to find that song if it's not on. It may be on YouTube. I don't know. But,
oh, sure it is. Yeah, the DOA. That thing, I think it rose all the way to the top of the charts, didn't it?
I think it might have. Yeah, here, Blood Rock DOA. There it is, right there. Wow. Yeah, that's the album cover.
Hey, you know, another show I'd like to do, Steve, here out of my studio is have Jody Dean and Buddy and you and some other of these musical guys, because Jody knew all of that stuff. You know, he started with KVIL, K-Love, all of them.
Yep. I remember Jody Dean real well.
He's still in the music entertainment business. Now it's movies. He's doing a lot of stuff with Sheridan Taylor, and he's doing that show, The Truth. The Risen.
Yeah, you know, Larry, I remember back in my high school days, you could go in on a Friday or Saturday night. You could walk right into the KFJZ studio and talk to the DJ while he's on the air. And
sure.
On Saturday nights, I think they had that Hubcap Carter show, which they play those old 50 songs, and that was a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, Fort Worth was really, I don't know if it's well known, but everything revolved around music.
Yeah, and our lives looked a lot more like American Graffiti, you know, than of course, you know, now things are a lot different, you know, and I guess my parents said it before me, you know, that growing up at the time they did was, And that must have been fun growing up in the 50s, but it was, just as much fun when we were growing up in the late 60s, 70s, all the great music that was being created, and just how, things were just simpler back then too.
Yeah.
And Larry, you chronicle a lot of that in the museum. What are some of your favorite musical pieces?
Gosh, Brent, I've got playbills. I've got photos of me with, I got on that click of getting my photo taken with all of these people. I had a good friend of mine that was one of the guys that ran Will Rogers. And when all these groups would come in, I'd get backstage and see if I couldn't strike up a conversation with them. And like you and Steve have said, these guys, they don't want somebody saying, "Oh, God, y'all are great." They just want somebody to talk to. They're just like me or you. So I was fortunate enough to have met a lot of those guys that headlined the shows, and that. But I've got some guitars. I've got a lot of pieces that are music related, and I'm going to start doing audio books or do a real book, get a ghostwriter, because I've got a photographic memory, and I've got most of those stories are all in my head. You're showing that Clarence Gatemouth Brown right now. He played at Caravan of Dreams, and I sit down and talk to him for 45 minutes. In fact, I talked to Steve the other day, and I talked to Wes Williams, a guy that knows, I thought Ray, what's his name, Steve? Linda Lou.
Oh, Ray Sharp.
Ray Sharp, yeah. Ray wants us to interview him. He still lives at his parents' house or his mom's house over there in Poly. A guy reached out to me, so he's 85 right now, but he's still got all of his faculties. So we're going to try to get over there and get an interview with Ray Sharp. He really set this town on fire with Linda Lou. My dad actually owned a club called the Playmate, and Ray played there, but he had his own club called the Linda Lou Club. You
remember, Larry, there were a couple of places that were popular. So you can have a guy like Clarence Gatemouth Brown come and play at a venue, a high-tone venue, so to speak, like Caravan of Dreams, or some of these guys like the Stones would come through here and play at Will Rogers or a convention center or whatever. But there were some late-night clubs that a lot of those guys, you never know when they might pop in. And one of them was the Bluebird, which you and I talked about, and we'll get back to that in a second. There's another place that served really good pizza and was just a kind of a biker bar type thing. That was the Hop over there on Berry Street.
Oh yeah, on Berry.
And everybody from Mick Jagger to Bob Dylan popped in there just unannounced and would get up and do a song or two on the stage. And you just never knew. But we talked about the old Bluebird Lounge over there. Bluebird, or I don't know if it's a lounge, but Bluebird Cafe or whatever it was. Not the cafe, that's in Nashville. The Bluebird was just a mecca for blues, and it was just an old ramshackle frame house that was right there on Horn Street in the Como area. And a lot of times, I remember going there and parking my car and thinking, "Is my car safe here?" And there'd be a guy out there going, "Well, if you give me $5 to watch your car, I can assure you it's safe," and that kind of thing. And then they're smoking barbecue out behind the building of the bar, and they're throwing everything from plywood to whatever on the pit, But you go in there, and I remember that Bluebird. You go in there and see B.B. King. He might be in there playing, just jamming away. And I remember one of the things that strikes me very vividly was how low the ceiling was in that place. It was like 6.5 feet. So you could walk in there and put your hand up on the ceiling and twirl around, But we would go in there and dance and just have a great time, and everybody got along. It was a great place.
In fact, it's been redone. I don't know if they've reopened it, but they threw some paint and screen doors on it. But talking about that ceiling, I would be in there, and those ceiling tiles would fall down.
Yeah.
And it was nothing for one of the customers to go get it and sit there and try to put it back in the frame. It was a hodgepodge, but you're right. There's no telling. Stevie Ray Vaughan played there.
Yeah, you never knew. It reminded me of that place that they showed in that fictional place in Caddyshack where those fraternity boys came in there in their suits and ties, and that big giant African American guy walks over. He goes, "We want to dance with your date," that kind of thing. And so it's nothing to see, these little sorority girls in there dancing away with some big bodyguard looking guy. It was just, but everybody was cool and never saw any. I'm sure there were some things that went on there that were not desirable, but for the most part, everybody, you never felt threatened going in there, and everybody, it was just a cool place to enjoy great music. And again, one of the thrills of that place was you never knew who might walk in the door.
That's exactly right. The Cellar, when I was one of the bouncers at the Cellar, is the same way. Some of the most famous bands in the world, some of them played right there. ZZ Top, what's his name, played there. The name of his group then was the Moving Sidewalk.
Yeah, Billy Gibbons. Yeah,
Billy Gibbons.
And and then when you go into the 80s, like the late 70s, early 80s, you may or may not know about a place like this. It was open for probably about 10 years. It was on East Lancaster, way out there, like Lancaster and Beach almost. It was a place called Zero's New Wave Lounge, and that was the beginning of the punk rock movement kind of thing. And you never knew who you might see in there. We saw the Go-Go's in there one time. We saw Elvis Costello popped in there and played. And then you had these local guys, kind of like the 60s movement. You had these local guys who were trying to emulate these punk rockers. And there was one guy that got to be pretty famous named Bobby Sox. And he was there's a if you go on YouTube and look up Bobby Sox, SOXX, there's an interesting little news story about him. He was a pizza delivery guy who at night became a wild punk rock guy. But that Zero's was another one of those places you never knew who might be playing in there. And it was just a tiny little dive. You want one of those places where you go and you stand in one place too long, your feet would stick to the floor,
Yeah. Guys, I got to run. I got some people in my office here. I want to tell you all again, happy anniversary. And
thank you.
Keep going. And let's get Buddy. We'll get Buddy Whittington and Steve and me to sit down, and maybe Michael and some other people. But we need to really crank up that deal at National Hall and I'd like to see a show out there every month if we could. There's plenty of musicians around that are starving that would love to play there for some notoriety. I could do it, share it to my platforms, and y'all can put it on Fort Worth Musical Moments and just keep this thing alive.
Well, Steve says you need to extend your bedtime by a few hours so you can make it out to one of those shows.
Yeah. Michael, his brother, told me that he's got something I can take that I won't get addicted to. My wife's a doctor, and she always tells me, you got to take the pills here, this and that. Don't ever take any of this other stuff. So, because 7:30, I cannot keep my eyes open. I'm gone. But I'm down here at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that's what they told me about something that I tried to keep me up at night, and it worked real well until I ended up in treatment. But anyway, so Larry, here's the thing. Yeah, and we are dedicated to making this National Hall thing work, and we want to do shows. If we had our brothers, it would be once a week, but certainly once a month. We've got a great promoter that we're bringing on board that's handling all the ticketing, and he's doing a great job. Chuck Morris, who just launched All-Star Entertainment International. So he's our ticketing and promotional partner. We've got another promoter here, marketing group called Panther City Marketing, Megan Bond, TCU girl, and she's brilliant, and she's starting to do some things for us to build up a database so we can get the past patrons and future patrons in there. But as anything else, these shows cost money to stage, and if you're bringing in the higher level of entertainment you're bringing in, the more expensive they are to stage. So, we want to fill the hall, and so the ticket sales will compensate for the cost of these things. And we want to find people that are willing to sponsor these things, maybe on a yearly basis or a seasonal basis or concert to concert basis. But and I would hope, Larry, that you can help us get the word out there that that's what we're looking for, and get all these folks that listen to you and tune into you behind this thing, and let's make it really happen, because we want to create a really cool music destination at National Hall. There's nothing like it. There's the stockyards with the honky tonks and the dance halls and all that, and that's great. But this is something different, and it can be a great addition to what's already going on down in the stockyard. So we appreciate any help you can and any exposure you can give us to bring awareness to this, so we can fill the seats.
Yeah, no, we need. I think I've got enough contacts that there's a lot of people with a lot of money in Fort Worth, and we need them. You know, not looking for a big return on investment, maybe breaking even or even losing some, but get that atmosphere coming back in here. That's once it gets going. It's like my group. People say, "How did you grow it to what you did?" We're going to be over 200,000 this year, and you just have to offer something that's interesting. And our history and the music history here, back with Milton Brown and Bob Wills. I mean, it's here. We just need to get the right people behind it. Ken Davis Industries, Cullen Davis is still around, and he might even be a player in that.
Yeah, you know, that's great. Whatever we can do to get some folks behind this thing to help us fund this, because then we, you know, the better funded it is, the better quality of entertainment we could bring in there. We've had people like Michael Martin Murphy, Junior Brown, and those guys that are interested in being a part of this thing. But you know, they come at a price, and they're willing to give us a super great discount on, you know, because they believe in what we're doing too. But you know, we've got to.
And you couldn't ask for a more beautiful hall. That thing is immaculate.
Well, not only that, it's a great hall, great atmosphere. The sound is great in there with this new sound system and lighting system. And they've got a great full bar in there with great drink prices. And then John Durham can whip up some mean barbecue, German food. He can. You know, so it's a one-stop deal. You can go there and have dinner, and then take in a show or a dance or a concert or whatever. And so we're determined to make this thing work.
Oh, it's going to work. Okay, guys, I got to go. Love you.
All right, love you, man. Hey, as he's going here, we're going to tell you, if you happen to be in the Fort Worth or surrounding areas and you need a vehicle detailed, hey, go look up Larry here. Here's his number, 817-965-2626. He does
Thank you.
phenomenal work, and he'd love to have your business. So.
Larry, I'm going to bring my car to you. My wife told me my car needed detailing, but if you find a chicken McNugget under the seat, it's mine. Okay.
See you guys later.
All right. Thank you so much, Larry.
Thank you.
That's Larry O'Neill with Fort Worth Memories. And Steve, we're going to be creating some new Fort Worth memories coming up this next week here at National Hall.
Yeah. And I hear a certain celebrities coming in from Louisville, Kentucky to help us pull this thing off. So
onward and upward. Boy, it's going to be a fun time here. We're looking forward to it. I understand still a few tickets remain, but they're going fast. Yeah, they're going fast, and you know, we've got some sponsors, I think, that are looking to pull the trigger on this thing to help out. But you know, it's going to be a full house, I believe. But we want to urge everybody, if you hadn't bought your tickets, to go ahead. You know, I think the VIP section is pretty much sold out, but we've got plenty of $20 tickets left, and so we're going to have a couple of vendors there. One vendor selling merchandise related to all the artists that will be performing there, CDs, all kinds of logoed T-shirts, caps, koozies, whatever. And then we've got another vendor that's got a little boutique here on Camp Bowie Boulevard called Mayfair, Rebecca Avant, who just one of my favorite little stores. Now, it's a women's clothing store. So is that why it's your favorite? Yeah. Well, I shop there for Kurt, you know. I was going to say, he's been rubbing off on you. Yeah, right. yeah. And I don't know that she sells wigs, but I know she sells hair bands to go along with that wig. But no, it's a great place. In fact, when I was in a little bit of trouble around my Christmas shopping, and it was Christmas Eve at 4:30 in the afternoon, I thought, oh my gosh, we'd had so much going on, and it dawned on me that I'd not gotten my wife hardly anything. Well, you've gotten kind of a track record of this lately. I know it. I've really been screwing up, you know, and my wife has shown me more than my share of grace. But I'm sure that the check will come, the bill will come. But I called Rebecca at home, and she was willing to open her store up for me, and I went in there and we did some last minute Christmas shopping, and you know, of
course, Jill loves everything in that store. So Rebecca's going to have a little space there. She's going to be selling some clothing items, and she does great accessories, like kind of real cool blingy costume jewelry and cowgirl hats and all kinds of hat bands. And so there's going to be some neat stuff there. So it's going to be a big doing, you know. We're going to have all kinds of stuff going on.
Of course, we got after that the taping of the Penny Gilly show coming up at the Little Red's Longhorn Saloon, and Clarksville Creative Sound is going to be well represented there as well.
That's right. That's right. You know, Penny Gilly and her husband Mike Stanglin is great friends of mine. They invited me to come on last year and be a part of that deal, and I had so much fun. And it was great exposure for us, and so they reached out to me and as Clarksville Creative Sound and wanted some younger folks in there to round out their taping session. So we got Evie Mae from Indiana, right? Yeah, yep. Evie Mae from Indiana, and then we've got Mackenzie and Austin McKetty out of Oklahoma, Chandler, Oklahoma. They're going to be taking in the taping of that show. So it'll be an all-day affair. I'm sure you and I will both be there to cheer them on and support them. And I know Dina Wood's going to be there. I think I'm not sure if Kurt's going to stick around for that or not. But anyway, we're going to be there. So that's exciting. It's great exposure for our artists and for Clarksville Creative Sound. Speaking of Dina here, this thing always just shows me Facebook user, but I think it's Dina who has been posting all these great links to a lot of the things that we were talking about in the show today. So if you have a few extra minutes to hang around, go click on some of those. We've got the legend of Ray Sharp in there, and Bob Dylan visits the Bluebird nightclub, some different things there. Also the wiki for DOA. So if you get bored this afternoon, go poke around there. Just want to make mention of the fact that since I will be headed to Fort Worth next week, we're going to do Fort Worth musical moments there live. The plans to get into National Hall and do it from National Hall. One way or another, we'll have you a show next Friday at 10 a.m. Central from Fort Worth. Man, it's going to be great to be together again to do it. Yeah, we're going to try to pull all the artists that are going to be in this show together, and maybe have them on and have a little roundabout show. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm really thrilled that you're coming in, Brent. That'll be great. It wouldn't be the same without you. So I'm glad that you're able to work it out, and hopefully you're in good shape at home with the wife, and not because I know you've been doing a lot of traveling. So. Well, it's been we've had a lot of downtime here since the end of the year, but now it's going to ramp up here. We got about 3 trips coming up in the next 45 days or something like that. We go from there to Kansas City to Houston, and we've got the National Farm Machinery Show here in Louisville, which is about like being out of town, so I'll be pretty tied up with that, and a few other things going on here. So a busy next month and a half here, but fun stuff. I want to say that we've also pretty much got everything set up, and we're going to start production on our TV show. Yeah. Exciting. We've got a final production meeting on the 10th of February with we've finally found our producer that's going to not only be able to produce a great show for us, but then through his proprietary technology, take this thing viral, bits and pieces of it or whatever. This guy's a wizard at that. And so we're excited about that. And so we're looking forward to getting that going. And that's we'll have more information on how you tune into that as it moves along, and we're still looking forward to the hard launch of American Country Network sometime probably in March, hopefully. And I know that you've been having some meetings with Tommy Snyder and the ACN guys on possibly some agricultural content and things. Yeah, there could be some cool stuff coming down the pike here. We're still in the early stages on all that stuff, so we can't give away too much yet. But stay tuned, because last I talked to him, it sounds like toward the end of March is what we're looking at here for a launch date, and then everything. Hey, we've been telling you all along things are going to happen fast in 2024, and here it is. We look up, it's already January 26th. It was just Christmas last week, and here we are, a month almost gone, and you know how fast February goes. So
this thing is going downhill like a snowball.
It's like, be careful what you ask for, you might get it, right?
Absolutely. So, yeah, we're excited about everything that's coming down the pike here. And I hope you again, we tell everybody every week, if you're not plugged into the Fort Worth Musical Moments Facebook group, the Clarksville Creative Sound Facebook group, and the Real Strong Media Facebook page, make sure you start following those pages and check in, because we got a lot of cool stuff coming up over the next weeks and months, and you're not going to want to miss it. Everything Larry's talking about here, a lot of cool stuff on the horizon.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to give Billy Bowles a plug too, because that's
Yes.
what you don't want to miss. I know Billy's a follower and a fan of ours, and we've certainly been a big fan of his as well. Billy does a great job keeping this traditional country, western swing music alive, and man, he's had some great shows last week. Last week, I think Clarksville Creative Sound got a whole segment, not because of any reason, but the fact that we've released a lot of really good music, and Billy found it worthy enough to include on his show, including a world radio premiere of a song that I did. So yours truly got to do a little premiere on a song that I did, that an old Nat King Cole song that I took and swung in Western swing style.
And it's phenomenal. And yeah, make sure you check him out. The original run, it's on KSSL FM out of the Lubbock, Texas area on Saturdays. And then, it'll be on Rural Strong Radio beginning at 1 p.m. Eastern, at noon Central on Sundays. You can find that at ruralstrongmedia.com or the Live 365 streaming radio app. We also have a second run on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. So if you miss it, some opportunities there. Catch it first. I guess it's 10 a.m. to noon Central Time on Saturday, KSSLFM.com for the original run. And then, again, RealStrongMedia.com on Sundays and Tuesdays. So you can catch a lot of opportunities to catch old Billy B. And again, follow his Billy Bowles Swinging Country group. If you're not already doing that, you can get all the details there for that. So,
and I also want to say real quickly, Brent, if you want to know where to buy and stream this music that coming out of Clarksville Creative Sound and other independent artists that, like a lot of the folks that Billy Bowles plays, because a lot of the pipeline that Billy Bowles gets fed from is through our friend Dina Wood at Indie Express, and Dina's subsidiary company called I2I Records is a retail portal where you're able to go in and stream, download this music. One of the great things about I2I, which, just like hallelujah, is that the revenue splits for the artist when these things get streamed are extremely generous versus when you stream something through Spotify, where it takes 1,000 streams to make $1 or something like that. That's just crazy. Dina is very generous, and all she does is hold back enough funds just to keep her thing going. It's she's not in it for the line her pockets by any means. She's in it to support the independent artists, and that's all Dina's ever been about, is helping the independent artists make a living doing this. And so it's just one more great thing to support and a great place to go. That's I, the number 2, I Records. You can Google that and find that and go on there. And she's putting a rapidly growing library of music available for you to upload.
And gets it out so quickly too. It's just astounding to me how quickly all this stuff moves.
Yeah, it really is. So, little by little, through people like Dina, and hopefully what you and I are doing, and my brother with all of his stuff that he's doing, the documentary film, the birth and history of Western Swing, the birthplace of Western Swing, Clarksville Creative Sound, the American Country Network, all through all these vehicles, we've got a very simple goal, and that is to change the music world.
Absolutely. Well, we'll do it one day at a time here. Also want to remind people, Tractors and Troubadours, the podcast is out now, episode 116 we're up to. You can find that at realstrongmedia.com or wherever you get podcasts. Listen to a little bit of the talk about the agriculture industry, so you understand where your food's coming from, support the farmers. We got some music on there this week from Dennis Ledbetter, one of the great honky tonkers out there. He's got a new duet out with Nikki Nelson, who is with Highway 101. They've got a new duet out. So
super talented. Nikki Nelson, what a great talent she is.
Absolutely. And they make a good duet team here. And another one you can find on i2irecords.com, I believe. And we got that off the Indie Express. And Dennis wanted to make sure we had that one out there. He's still cranking out some great music. So go check that out. Again, episode 116 of Tractors and Troubadours. Now we get to work on 117, and we've got about 5 more days of Rural Strong Ag Reports and another Fort Worth Musical Moments, and then we'll hit Fort Worth here. We got a lot to do between now and then. A little high school basketball tonight, a lot going on.
Well, I can't wait to get you to Fort Worth. Maybe you can get a little R&R in. We'll have a lot going on, but always love to have you here, and be a lot of fun for all of us to get together. I know Kurt and Braden Ryle are driving in from Tennessee, so they'll be arriving Thursday. So it's going to be a great weekend.
Only problem I have when I come, it's hard to leave.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I'm sure everybody feels that way about our show too, but we got to get rolling to the next thing here. So thank you to everybody who's joined us today. We appreciate it. Hope you come back again next Friday, 10 a.m. Central, as we're going to be doing it live from National Hall. So for Steve Marquardt, Brent Adams for Fort Worth Musical Moments, we hope you have a great day, and check back in with us again next Friday. You've been watching Fort Worth Musical Moments, a production of Rural Strong Media and Clarksville Creative Sound, copyright 2023. Please join the Fort Worth Musical Moments Facebook group and join us each Friday at 10 a.m. Central as we introduce you to another key figure in Fort Worth's musical heritage.